The pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Blair, go ahead and if you do, roll call, please.
Okay.
Mayor Muller,
Present.
Councilor Gerson,
Present.
Councilor Gorley,
Here.
Councilor Trask,
Here.
Councilor Coleman,
Here.
Councilor Goebel,
Here.
Councilor Nash.
Let the record show we have 6 present, 1 absent. I need a motion and a second to approve the absence of Councilor Nash.
So moved.
Second.
1 second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Let the record show we have 6 ayes with no nays to approval of Councilor Nash's absence. I imagine he's working, so this is kind of an early in the day situation here. Recognition of visitors and hearing of petitions. Anybody like to come forth, be heard? Okay. Old business, nothing, new business. Public hearing regarding community development block grants.
That'd be you.
Oh, there's instructions right there. We just need to, this is necessary for,
Go straight to public hearing on this here.
yeah, we're required to have a public hearing as part of our, one of the CDB, well, all the CDB grants require public hearing. One in particular is ending, and we are seeking to put in another application. And so we need to have a public hearing to end one, and the same public hearing can also begin the next application.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and at 5:33, I'll go ahead and start a public hearing. I asked the staff to read the notice to public hearing.
Okay, public notice and notice of public hearing. The City of Sweet Home is completing an emergency response assistance project funded with community development block grant funds from the Oregon Business Development Department. The location of the project is Eastland County. It is estimated that the project has benefited at least 200 persons, of whom 50% are low or moderate income. The City of Sweet Home is also eligible to apply for an additional 2020 Community Development Block Grant from Business Oregon. Community Development Block Grant funds come from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The grants can be used for public facilities and housing improvements, primarily for persons with low and moderate incomes. Approximately $12 million will be awarded to Oregon non-metropolitan cities and counties in 2020. The City of Sweet Home is preparing an application for emergency response assistance for projects that prevent, prepare for, and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. The maximum grant that a city or county can receive for emergency response assistance for projects that prevent, prepare for, and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic is $50,000. The City of Sweet Home is preparing an application for 2020 Community Development Block Grant from Business Oregon for the Boys and Girls Club of the Greater San Diego to offer emergency child care services for healthcare workers, first responders, and other individuals who are unable to return to work due to the lack of adequate child care resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. It is estimated that the proposed project will benefit at least 200 persons, of whom at least 51% will be low or moderate income. A public hearing will be held by the City of Sweet Home, by the Sweet Home City Council at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, October 20th in the council chambers at Sweet Home City Hall, 3225 Main Street in Sweet Home, Oregon. One of the purposes of the hearing is for the City Council to obtain citizens' views about the project and to take comments about the local government's performance. Another purpose of the hearing is for the City Council to obtain citizen views and to respond to questions and comments about community development and housing needs, especially the needs of low and moderate income persons, as well as other needs in the community that might be assisted with a community development block grant project and the proposed project. Written comments are also welcome and must be received by Monday, October 19th at 3225 Main Street, Sweet Home, Oregon 97386. Both oral and written comments will be reviewed by the City Council. The location of the hearing is accessible to persons with disabilities. Please contact Blair Larson at 541-818-8036 if you will need any special accommodations to attend or participate in the hearing. More information about Oregon Community Development Block Grants, the proposed project, and records about the city's past use of community development block grant funds is available for public review at Sweet Home City Hall during regular office hours. Advance notice is requested. If special accommodations are needed, please notify Blair Larson at 541-818-8036 so that appropriate assistance can be provided. Permanent involuntary displacement of persons or businesses is not anticipated as a result from the proposed project. If displacement becomes necessary, alternatives will be examined to minimize the displacement and provide required and reasonable benefits to those displaced. Any low and moderate income housing that is demolished or converted to another use will be replaced.
Okay. At this time, I'll ask audience for comments regarding the previous CDBG's project and the city's performance. Okay. Is there any online, is this being live?
It is live streamed and there's nobody.
Nobody, okay.
Anyway.
Okay. Now I ask the audience for comments regarding the proposed CDBG project.
Proposing a continuation of the same project.
Okay. Nothing else. I'll close the public hearing at 5:07. Okay. Moving on. Appointment of manager pro tem.
So as you may or may not be aware, the charter specifies that during the absence of the manager from the city, during his or her temporary disability to act as manager, or during the interim, when the city council is seeking a manager, the council shall appoint a manager pro tem who shall possess the powers and discharge the duties of the manager during such absence or disability only. This was brought up by our attorney. We should look at this. Ray, as you are aware, is currently out of the country until 28th, I believe. And so it's been suggested that this qualifies as a time when the council should appoint a manager pro tem. But that's up to the will of the council.
Okay. I'm going to open it up for discussion of council and their thoughts on this. At this time, go ahead. County Council, want any thoughts or ideas on this?
So I have a question. How is this different than when we had Christina step in when we didn't have a manager? How is the language on this different?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, on this one. Basically, it still was a council. The mayor stepped in, Councilor Gorley stepped in, but it was also the approval of the council members to contact League of Oregon Cities, I believe, to start finding the temp of, well, we actually called the city attorney to, or not city attorney, the Akins. We contacted Akins and had him as a consulting regarding this matter because of the nature of it. But we also, League of Oregon Cities, we started the process of finding a pro tem city manager, and that's where Christie came in. And then again, the city council was part of the decision at the time of approving who they came up with as far as the pro
Because there
tem.
was a time limit on that. There was like 6 months or something that she could only do that position.
Correct.
Correct, 6 months.
It's further down in there that you can't appoint somebody twice for more than 6 months. So it would be the third, I would think that it was the third one during the interim between, if your city manager not only just went on vacation, but went, but was between jobs. That was the third one up there, I think.
I can pull up the full text.
And the council is seeking a manager.
Yeah. So,
And so on this, just as a tail end, this is one of the things that, after talking with Ray about it and everything, might be something that we're going to discuss when we do the chart. Is this the system that we want or not, or can we improve it, or
I see some,
technology and stuff like that? I mean, 5 years ago, you wouldn't be talking about it, but now you can Zoom and be right there and, you know, have your signature online, and
So the
Yeah.
difference that you're asking is that we create language that the manager can appoint somebody in his absence? Or continue with the council making that appointment, knowing ahead of time?
Right. That's part of the discussion with the charter.
I agree with Robert on this. This is something that needs to come before the charter committee and be discussed.
Yeah.
Because there's a few scenarios that come to mind that could create a problem. You know, if you leave the city, I mean, this is a hypothetical, I want council input on this, but if you have a city manager appoint somebody to be in his place, without the council approval, then you could have potential mutiny on your hand, because if you put somebody in place that city staff don't like, they could all bail. I think it has to be the whole council's, in my opinion, the council's decision who they put in place. But this needs to be cleaned up so that it's a process that makes some sense. Because you have to look beyond, let's say, you have to have some kind of structure, because if you know, in the past, I was talking to Councilor Trask regarding this, you know, if you have to have something like, let's just hypothetically, if you don't have something in the charter, what happens? Because see, right now, the mayor, I'm on the city bank account to sign, okay? If you don't have anything on there, there's nobody else on the bank account, then you just can't just sign checks. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. So you got to have something. Maybe it's your pro tem that's also needs to be on the bank account. You have to have something that says, okay, in case of, let's say, the city manager and myself are traveling to a meeting and we get killed in a car wreck. You got to have something to say who's going to step in if that should happen. I mean, you got to look beyond what, you know, what happens if some scenarios. You got to look at the whole picture. So I think the council needs to decide who fills the gap if the city manager is gone. But you got to look at the whole picture of scenarios that may possibly happen too. So I don't know what's the council's thoughts on this.
When's Julie coming back?
Sooner the better.
Right. It does need to be cleaned up quite a bit, but there needs to be a action plan for step 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Truly.
So, and
Greg, we talked about that too, and I think you said, and I did not know this, when we were doing the working through the process, and Christie was here, we were working through the process, but I think you told me, and this is before my time, probably everybody on the council, but that the mayors did take over at some point, not necessarily making a bunch of decisions, but before coming to the council, I would assume, and that's probably not my should do, but somebody has to be in charge.
correct me if I'm not wrong, Robert, that's what happened in the past. The mayor stepped in, but the mayor,
Appointed by council.
yeah, no, but the mayors didn't really make a decision per se. They stepped in and overseen
Right.
the process, but there was zero decision. So in other words, if the mayor had to make a decision, you had to have a council come together and say, this is the decision he's made. The council makes the decision. It's just a facilitator. And so,
Can we even do that? The way the charter showed up for our mayor, the way it's wrote up? It's not a strong mayor system.
yeah, it's kind of a strong mayor system, yeah.
I think, given the language right now, the way it stands, is you really could, the council could choose to appoint any manager pro tem. And they get the ability to execute all of the duties that city manager Towery currently has, to make decisions that affect the direction of the city. The thing that it specifically says is they can't remove or add any staff. So it could be anybody, including the mayor, if that was the choice of the council.
Yeah, 'cause the question comes back is, okay, we're the council, who do we appoint? That's where the struggle comes, is who do we appoint? And we have to be careful on our side of who we appoint too, because you appoint the wrong one, it could backfire on you in the city too.
And certainly,
And the other way with technology, the way it is right now, is what we're doing is using the charter and of course it was written years ago, where you just say absence. Well, that's one of the debates or the talk about it. What is absent? Is him just going down there on vacation really absent? You can argue no, but he is out of the country and he is supposedly having vacation and not doing business here. So we brought it here
Well,
supposedly.
yeah, I gave several scenarios. It's, yes, he is on a plane. He is out of the country. He's traveling. What happens if his plane goes down? We don't have a charter to really specify what's going to happen. Rather, will a council make a decision?
Taken to the extreme also, this language, depending on how you define absence, he lives outside of the city limits.
Yeah.
So he would be absent every single night, if you took it to that extreme. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's just a kind of a indication of how it needs to be kind of cleaned up and defined as to what constitutes that absence.
There's a difference between a foreseen absence and an unforeseen absence.
Too.
And I
No.
think the language has to be strong and inclusive, but I think that it's going to take more than legal advice. And we need to probably look at what other cities have that, because they've already done the legwork on this stuff.
Yeah, in the charter, we've got, what, 5 or 6 in the model one too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And there's differences. There's definitely differences.
Definitely differences.
So,
Now, Ray and I,
some of them are one sentence and some of them are way more than that.
yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to go through them and see the differences in, like I have 5 pages that I went on through today in the League of Oregon City one that says stuff that we kind of have, but it's not quite the same as we have. And so it's going to be interesting in this charter review to see how we come out on that. So.
again, I approached Ray a couple times regarding this matter and I said, you're leaving the country. You need to address this. Who's in charge? And he basically said that he was assigning Blair Larson is in charge of the city. I said, okay, but the charter doesn't say that. So no, that's where I was, I'm not taking anything on, I'm just saying, it's not what it says. So my concern was we have to clean this up. I'm not saying you're not qualified, obviously you are, because I know your background, but, it leaves it a little bit. And it also needs to be, besides how you vote for a mayor too, but also, it was part of the charter's discussion, but you also have to clean up what happens if the mayor gets killed. I mean, it's like I'll go all the way back to Christmas tree. We were on a plane flying to Washington DC. What happens if the mayor and the city manager go down? You've got to spell out what potential, the pro tem steps in. But let's even go farther. And this is why in some cases, especially in higher up levels of government, you don't have the president and the vice president on the same plane, or they're not near each other. I mean, they've got their game plan in place. What happens if let's say the pro tem and the mayor and we have 3 of and the city manager were on a trip to a training, or we were somewhere and we all 3 didn't make it back. I mean, you got to know, how do you go to the 4th? How do you, I guess maybe I'm going too deep in the weeds and but.
Well, typically, it's my experience that the rest of the council would be convened and decide amongst themselves who takes in that seat. Because they're the ones who have had to work together.
Yeah.
That's the way it is right now. I mean,
Yeah.
if it comes down and there's nothing there, then basically the council gets together and decides
But
how far you want it to go before it gets to that spot, because that's always going to be the bottom spot, is everybody just gets together and decides. So how many spots do you want above that before you have to?
that's my question, is how deep in the weeds do you want to go?
Right.
And so that's the question of the council. How far do you want to go down into this?
Well, for me too, Mr. Mayor, is the fact that we can what if this to death.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go on for another hour talking about this, but I think it can be more simple than what maybe we would get into those weeds for. Because the chances of all 3, the pro tem and you and the city manager being gone at the same time might be pretty remote. But we did have that situation when we went to Washington DC. Were you the pro tem then, Diane?
No, I don't think.
Well, so then not all three of us were gone.
Yeah, we had a scenario.
And
there.
that never even crossed our minds, I would assume. I didn't think about it.
Again, we can get really deep in the weeds, but I mean, that's just something to think about, especially from a charter.
We just want, I got an answer for that. It's very easy. Just don't let Ray go.
So I guess,
That's pretty simple.
I think this needs to be turned over. I think council input's important here. I think you need to I need feedback from the council as your thoughts, for one.
Mhm.
Two, Ray did recommend that Blair fill in his spot while he's gone. So we need to have a council decision if that's what we want to do tonight, so that he can assume the role moving forward, but let the charter decide what we need to do. And that's, I guess, my thought and opinion. Councilor Goble.
I think we should just do 1 and 2, like for the mayor and pro tem, and then if the mayor and pro tem or the mayor goes away, that the pro tem doesn't want to do it, then we just bring it to a vote. To see what we do. And
Perfect.
We don't need to go down the line and do that, because you have to do that every time there's an election too. And Mr. Larson, I'm fine with him. I know his credentials too. He's a good add to our team, so I don't have any problems with that.
Okay. Any other council thoughts?
I don't have an issue with that either. We talked about that today.
Councilor Coleman? And
No, I think that Mr. Larson not putting the previous city manager himself is a great choice for that. And I agree with Councilor Goble that mayor and then pro tem, and then after that convene council as far as making decision after
Okay.
that.
So I need a motion and a second to
Mr.
approve.
Mayor, before we get there,
Sorry.
I don't have a problem with the city manager appointing somebody, but it might be to our advantage to say, hey, listen, we probably should be in contact with all the councilors to see that they're okay with that situation. And I have no issue with that. And I have no issue with you being I really don't. But when I read that the other day, maybe 2 days ago, I'm thinking, holy moly, I did not know this.
Yeah.
And I bypassed it when I read it the first time. I'm thinking, it's never been that way in my opinion, the way I remember it anyway.
And I agree with you. And I believe that since we do not have supporting language in a process, that it should be by council action.
Yes.
That
Yes.
occurs at this time,
Yes.
not consensus, but by action.
Yeah,
Because
until this gets straightened out.
it needs to get straightened out. And it should be council decision, because Ray appointed him. Of course, you read council decision, hypothetically, what would happen is we put it to voting and everybody said no.
And that's something that should be considered in charter review discussions, because as you said, there are absences for different reasons, right? If it's an unforeseen absence, that's one thing. If it's a foreseen absence that's like a vacation or something that's planned for, it's a completely different situation, and you would expect, some sort of, you're not really changing your whole management team or anything like that. You would expect the management team to continue on the same path. Whereas if you have an absence that's more of a permanent nature, and you're gonna have a new city manager or be looking for a new city manager, that's more of an overall shakeup that is different, a different situation.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about it, basically you don't have to go more than 2 deep, like you guys said, and council can make the decision. But you can also add a proviso in there that if it is, if you do allow the city manager to make the decision on some of those, like he's on vacation, okay, so we're gonna have some, so he appoints, you just have the pool, it being his, it's gotta be a department head. So basically, if the department head was there before the decision was made, presumably he's doing an okay job to take up the 2 weeks for this, without coming to council for a vacation, or for a foreseen something, or whatever.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Coleman.
Wouldn't, something like that, if he's just going on vacation here and there, wouldn't that be just part of the day-to-day operations that we wouldn't really have to, we could just put the language for them, wouldn't have to come to us?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that would be, in my opinion, would be fine.
Yeah.
Okay. It just needs to be spelled out just in case he's flying to Mexico. They don't let him back in the country, or he plane crashes.
Since the charter, just to go on, if the charter people can talk about it, but if it comes to a decision and the charter goes out and it doesn't pass for whatever reason, then basically I think you just come back And whether it's in the council rules or an ordinance or whatever, you just say, this, we're going to define what absence means. It does not mean vacation, and deal with it.
Yeah, I agree with that. So,
So,
Councilor Gordon.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council accept the recommendation from City Manager Ray Towery for the temporary placement of Mr. Larson as Manager Pro Tem.
I second that.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Let the record show we have 6 ayes with no nays, with 1 absent. Approval of Blair Run City in the absence of our city manager, Ray Towery.
And I want you to know I took all notes. I took notes for the charter meeting.
Yeah.
I think it's just a great topic for charter and get some things cleaned up. It's very good information. Discussion only, amendments to the commercial exterior improvement program.
Okay, so the rest of the items tonight have kind of come out of our previous economic development workshop. First thing up for discussion are potential amendments to our, the SEEP program, as we call it, Commercial Exterior Improvement Program. This was the purposes of this program. First, what I'd like to talk about is, kind of give you an idea of where the current program is, an indication of why we think changes would be helpful, what changes we'd like to make, and then some other questions that you may want to consider when thinking about this program. So first off, just to review, this program applies to all commercially zoned property in the city. For most projects, applicants can qualify for 50% of the project cost up to $5,000. Some improvements can qualify for more if they are deemed by the review committee as exceptional, having an exceptional public purpose to them. That committee can recommend larger amounts if, like I said, if it's with the purposes and intents of the program. This program is currently budgeted in the Economic Development Fund, which, as you are aware, we don't have a revenue stream going into that. What we have there is what we have. And so that's one of the reasons why we've begun these economic development workshops to be careful about using those funds in the best way for the city. So why change? Despite several successful projects, there are still many properties, especially in the downtown area, that are in need of beautification. The council identified the downtown as being a high priority. And so we kind of want to make sure that this program meets the needs of that area. $5,000 doesn't go very far when you're improving a commercial property. And right now, the program's successes are spread along the entire length of Sweet Home, which is, as you know, it's a large distance to cover. And so that has the tendency of kind of diluting everything across that whole area. So some changes that we believe could help would be increasing the maximum grant award to in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $15,000, keeping that the same kind of proportions that we're willing to cover up to 50% of a project, but limit eligibility to kind of first impression properties. So areas that new visitors see first as they come into town. So the downtown area and what I've kind of called the gateway area, kind of the areas where we're first arriving. If you limit eligibility to those areas, you're going to get more bang for your buck, because that's really what's generating the impression of Sweet Home when people come. Another suggestion that we really would help is simply to require projects to post a city provided sign stating that their improvements were made possible in part by a city grant. The next slide shows a map that we're proposing be the area. Those blue and purple areas, the reason for different colors is because those are different zones. The purple is the downtown, is the C1 zone, and then the blue would be the C2 highway commercial zone. If when you consider the area on Main Street from First Avenue to 18th Avenue and along Long Street from Holly Road to 18th Avenue, that's really kind of the core first impression area when it comes to the city. And so that's kind of, if you limit your eligibility to those areas, we believe it'd be more bang for the buck. Finally, just some questions to consider. It's important to kind of review, I think periodically review programs like this to ensure that they are meeting your goals. So some questions to consider. Will this improvement make it more likely for visitors to stop or return to Sweet Home? Will the improvement make it more enjoyable for residents to walk around downtown? Will this improvement have the visual impact that the council is seeking? And will this improvement encourage neighboring property owners to invest in their buildings or properties? These are kind of ideas that came to mind, but you know, you're the stewards of programs like this, and we really want to make sure that they match your goals. We've talked about the need for improving the downtown, and so I just wanted to kind of get some discussion and feedback. Is this a direction you would like to head? Are there other things that you would like us to consider? What are your thoughts?
I'll open up for council discussion. Some of the councilors' thoughts.
Well, Mr. Mayor, there's been several of those situations where somebody improved their building or their property or whatever, and we've talked about this, and I talked to Blair and the city manager about this, is that $5,000 doesn't go a long ways. And some of these projects are not $10,000. They're $100,000 or even more than that. And a prime example of that is, of course, the Rio Theater, and he used that to the max, and that's fine. But I've talked to you about that, and Ray, and I've talked to Blair about it. I don't think $5,000 would go very far. And I've kind of tried to say that 10,000 would be better. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we went above that $5,000 on a couple of things, and that's fine with me, because it has made a big difference in that particular area. And so $15,000 is a lot of money. It is. But do we have a committee on that, or do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, if we don't trust the committee to do what was right for the city, then we're probably on the wrong path. But I think I trust them to do the right thing, and hopefully they do, and I'm all for this. I think it's been a long time coming, in my opinion.
We got 5 committee members, myself and you, Dave Bauer, Joanne McQuarrie. Well, there's George, Joanne, Dave, you, and I. It's 5.
I'm not on the committee.
Well, you're still represent part of, technically. Yeah, okay.
When it comes to the committee, I think the committee really takes its cues from the documents that we put together to govern the program. And so the purposes that are outlined there, that's really what they're looking at. And from what I've noticed, the motivation among the committee members is very much wanting to help properties in Sweet Home and do whatever we can to help out. I think that guidance from these documents is really the crucial thing, because it really focuses the committee in the right direction when it comes to that.
Is there a path for those people who have a business that would like to seek the $10,000 like the Rio did? Is there another, within that purple area, is there a clear path for them to be able to do that if they need it?
So the purple area, you're talking about the C1 zone?
Yeah, that you have the blue that get the higher amount, right?
Oh, no, that's
the
not,
opposite?
that's, no.
No.
The map is not intended to give different amounts to different people.
Thank you.
No.
That's what I was
The reason
concerned
for
about.
the blue and the purple on that map is simply, when Joe was writing out the map, he just showed the existing land use zones. The C1, which is the downtown commercial zone, and the C2, which is the highway commercial zone. That map area, everything blue and purple would be eligible the same as anything else. What that map does that's different than the way the program has been run before is that it excludes everywhere else that's zoned commercial, which is pretty much most of the frontage along Highway 20 is almost all zoned commercial in some way. There's some that's high density residential, but a large amount of it is zoned commercial. So that's the main difference that change would make, would be if you had some other properties that are closer to Mason Lake would not be eligible anymore. And so the reasons for that change would simply be to focus on the downtown. Now, my recommendation with that, and one of the reasons that I came up with that idea was, let's get downtown fixed first. And then if there are other changes we want to make, we can gradually spread out from there. But that area makes the biggest impression on people. And that's kind of why we were suggesting focusing that. But that certainly should be a topic of discussion among them all.
Counselor Goble, do you have something?
Yes, other than the Rio, who else, how many, just an average, who else has used that?
How many?
You know,
So I can tell you exactly how many projects we've had.
No, I know 1, 2,
that's
3.
all the way through that we've, okay.
Well, O&M,
One point is
Money Med.
Driftway, the Presidency Center, I think. I think even A&W, I'm not positive, I think A&W did.
So there's about 28 in the last.
Yeah, it's quite a few.
2019 and 2018, there have been 28 projects
that were funded.
that did receive funding. Yeah.
So it's actually picking up more 2019, 2020.
There were only 2019, but there's been 7 in 2020. 2018 had the biggest number of applications.
I guess
Revamped at that time.
some of the challenges that I think we're faced with was you got certain businesses that did it numerous times, and I think it should be limited to one instead of them applying 3, 4, 5 times, giving other businesses opportunities. That was kind of one of the challenges. The other is the interpretation of the project.
Yeah.
You know, that's another thing that's been a challenge because how you interpret the facade versus the roof versus the side of the building versus, you know.
And that's what my concern is if you have, say you have an applicant who comes in and you can maybe from the street, if you're in a car and you're higher up, you can see maybe 10% of their roof. But their application is only replacing their roof. Is that really accomplishing the goal that the program has? I mean, in a strict sense, yeah, because you can see it. But is that really doing much to beautify the overall town? It's not as visible.
The challenge.
Those are some of my concerns.
Yeah, the challenge, Blair, to me would be that if you got an applicant, when you say limited to the areas, I know that we'd like to clean the downtown up. That's a priority. But if you got downtown business, just say, I could care less. I'm not going to clean it up. And I've got an applicant that wants to clean his business up, then why are we eliminating it? So that's something to think about. Because there's a few businesses, I don't think you're ever going to see them to clean up because they can care less. It's a shame. It really is truly a shame.
Well, Mr. Mayor, so a couple of things. So and I agree with the mayor, if we're going to limit just a certain business to maybe one, maybe that should be one per year or something to that effect. And what if we have somebody in Foster that wants to really clean up their place, like Spoletos or whatever? Are we going to deny them that opportunity because they are in the city? That'd be my other question. I don't know if we do or we don't.
And that's what you should consider if
Yes.
you want to limit the area. Another reason for limiting the area was to make up for the fact that you are increasing the grant amount.
Yeah.
That it's going to cost more to increase these grant amounts. And if you limit the area, maybe that helps keep it from bleeding out too quick. But again, that's a policy decision for you to deliberate about right now. That's why we're having this conversation.
Well, Mr. Mayor, this is probably something that we probably need to address at our next budget. I don't know that we'll run out of the money we have. I don't know. Who knows, but it'd be one of those situations where we need to address that at some point. Maybe not next year or the year after, but at some point we'll have to do some sort of address that.
Well, let's ask Brandon, how much a year is that bringing in interest?
It's probably bringing in about 20,000.
20,000 is all.
Not this year though, because this year's interest
It's way more?
is way down.
No.
No,
I know, I'm just kidding.
So you can almost assume it'll be next to zero this year.
Councilor Coleman.
I just had a question about how much has already been given away and what's the balance of that account right now?
It's quite a bit. It's still up there.
Well, I'm totally agreeing that the amount needs to come up. But I've also thought that the criteria needs to be changed to be a little bit more, just not so free. I mean, it needs to make some sense to the community too. I think we've given a little bit of the money away that was like, okay, it made it look nice, but was it really the goal of what we're trying to achieve for the city too? So.
I'm totally in agreement with increasing it, but I too wonder about the same business getting it repeatedly. I think it'd be best if it was.
Now, we discussed that pretty intense there for a while. I'm nothing against the business, but it was just he applied quite a few times and.
Well, and then you get into, is it a downtown revitalization project or is it a business revitalization project? And so the citizens that live in Foster, are they being disenfranchised by being excluded from that? Are their neighborhoods not as important? You get into these things, that equity issue. So we kind of need to refine that. And I think that a business, wherever they're at in that corridor, that they should have an equal opportunity if they're trying to revitalize their business to draw in business into our community, but at the same time, be accountable for how they do that. And the double dipping, if the language is cinched up in the first place so that somebody's not miscommunicating, it is clear. And I think we can avoid that, but everybody should have a process.
So the double dipping, the way that has been, that has not happened in my time here. Prior to coming, it was done and I was told the justification was that it was divided up into different projects. And that was suggested that, okay, this particular improvement is this project and this particular improvement on the same building is this project, and they were applied for separately. Now I'm not saying that is a good thing. But that's the way it was done. Now we can certainly tighten things up and keep that from happening. I do think that projects or that overall buildings should kind of be looked at as a whole for that entire building, everything that you want to do. And I think that if somebody's got really big visions and plans and big ideas, I would love to see more of that happen and promote that kind of thinking and reward that with a great grant, because those are the things that really pop, that really have an impact on the surrounding area. But the question is, how often, what is the process for doing that?
Is it reasonable to assume that the amount that a person receives and the opportunity to revisit that investment would be based on the overall cost of the project? Tie it in, because some smaller businesses cannot afford a lot, and this makes a big difference for them. But if they're going to invest $100,000 of their own, maybe it's a big enough project and investment for our community that we would be short-sighted not to help them out a little bit a second time. I don't know.
It's hard to say because every application it handles it differently. And there's certainly some projects where they probably would have spent the money anyway, regardless of whether they got a grant from us. But then there are other projects where this was the real difference between doing the project or not doing the project. And that's from my perspective and efficiently using the funds for the purpose, doing our best to capture those people that otherwise would not make the improvement, that's really where your bread is buttered, because the other folks are going to do it anyway. But we want to be that game changer where this grant is the reason they're going to bite the bullet and make the big improvement. It's really tricky to organize your grant program to do that, though.
Just to go back to Councilor Coleman's question real quick, 435,000 is the current balance in that fund
What was the amount that
I
we
showed
started
you-
off with?
for this year. We started
No,
out,
overall, because this had a creation date. Do you remember what it was roughly?
I think you started with 460,000,
Thank you.
about that.
Overall, since 2018, and I probably need to update this and make sure that this is where we're at. I'm showing that we spent about $90,000 on grant awards for this program.
And we had a couple that were denied and just,
There were some that were.
and there was one was they were just doing windows. And it was an organization and the other one was not in the zone. But,
So, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I have questions.
go ahead.
So first of all, it depends upon your direction of entry into the city as to what you're talking about, you know, I mean, if you're coming from that direction, it's a whole nother ballgame, right?
I'm talking about the vast majority of people that come into town come from that direction.
Okay. So for me, I think part of the problem is that the downtown area, this is gonna sound terrible, but that the downtown area is dirty. The curbs need to be cleaned, the sidewalks need to be cleaned, the buildings need to be washed. Those kinds of things need to be done to help, okay? And I've used this comment before about putting lipstick on a pig, but I mean, I'm just saying that to me, if we use some of that money to pay our employees to clean up the downtown just superficially, it might be helpful. It also might say to business owners, wow, the city really does care that they're going to do something here and help us out with this, you know. I would like to see the money go to very specific projects downtown. For instance, the awnings and the overhangs. They need to be repaired or replaced or whatever. So maybe if we said we were going to help with that, people might get together and talk about, well, gosh, how can we make these awnings on our side of the street all the same? You know, I mean.
Well, and the program does cover awnings. If somebody comes and proposes replacing all the awnings on a whole row of buildings, that project is most certainly eligible. And we would pay at least 50% of that up to the cap.
Well, we got a situation where there's two building owners that were saying, we'd like to fix your awning and paint your building and so forth. And they say, you're not touching my building.
Well, I
And
know
then
that.
there's where we were faced with, you ain't touching my building. And so,
I recognize that, but.
so that's gonna be another challenge.
Well, and then,
I agree
like you
with you.
said, if you get awnings or, you know, they cost, but that's what they can do now. And then later they want to do windows and paint, that's two separate projects. And so it might be the amount we're looking at and not how many times they come back for help, you know? If it ends up being 15,000, but they've invested that in stages, they may not have identified those in the first place. It might be after they get the awning up that they decide, oh, that window treatment would actually make it a big difference, so.
And maybe that's the way you're concerned about doing multiple projects for the same address. Maybe that's the way you address that, is you give an overall cap of how much you're willing to see go to one property. But an individual project might, if they do it in stages, right? Say this 6 months I can afford to do my awning, and then the next 6 months after that, I'm gonna be able to paint my building or do something else to the facade. And so each of those projects is considered separately, but you have a different cap for maybe a year or a 2-year period for this address, that you're not going to give them more than $20,000 or something like that. I don't know.
So, Mr. Mayor, I have another question. So Blair, a lot of these buildings, particularly the empty ones, the owners don't live in town, right?
I've heard.
Right. So have you been able to contact those owners of those buildings?
It hasn't been contacting owners of vacant buildings hasn't been anything that I've been working on lately. It certainly can be, but most of our attempts with this particular program has been working with buildings who will talk to us and who are seeking. There are some out-of-town businesses that have talked to me about this program and wanting to use it, but they just haven't given me anything yet.
The only reason why I say that is that some owners may not know about it.
And that's an issue. And it's an issue of information and getting our communications out. So when a property, with the information that we have on properties that's available without any interaction on their part, is limited to basically county tax records. And the address that's on file with the assessor's office is the address that we've got. Those, from what I have noticed, are not the best way to get a hold of people, because people tend to ignore stuff that comes in the mail to those addresses unless it's a bill that they have to pay. I haven't had a lot of luck getting a hold of people that way. So getting better ways of connecting to people, email, phone numbers, is more effective. And that's what I would like to have, to be able to get a hold of those people and advertise what we've got.
We're kind of leaning towards the next topics of this.
That's kind of leading into other topics, yeah.
Tonight.
So I have a question real quick. So we have business owners that are having a hard time. The profit margin is small. They're coming out of this COVID issue, and they would like to they've identified that painting their building is a good thing. Do they have to dollar match that, or can they say, look, I need $2,500 to paint my building?
So if they're applying for this program, they would put in an application saying, this is what my project is. This is, give us their basic information, and they would provide estimates of what this is going to cost. The committee then reviews that, ensures that it meets the purposes of the program and it meets all the eligibility requirements that we have in place. Once they make a recommendation, it then goes to the city manager for him to approve. After I get his approval, I send them a letter saying, this is what you're approved for. Go ahead and do your project, and then send us copies of your receipts and your pictures of it being that it's done. And so it's a reimbursement grant. So then we give them their grant award after they've already given us the receipts that it's spent and everything. So it could be that cash flow wise, it is a difficult thing for some properties. The only problem with changing that is you run the risk of the project not getting done and not being able to get the money back. So that's why it's been done on a reimbursement basis.
Back to Councilor Gerson's point, maybe the council comes together and say, we designate or set aside a certain amount of money, which goes into later, what we're talking about later on here. Set an amount of certain set amount of money, whatever that dollar amount is, whatever the council decides, and revisit all the business owners downtown and say, we will pay, and it's not a match, we will identify certain businesses, we will paint your building up to, X, Y, or whatever, at least up to council. And you just have to agree that we will, do that. Maybe that gets a facelift. Maybe we get something in the future out of doing something like that. Maybe that gives them incentive, say, okay, maybe I will do something to my business, or I will find somebody maybe wants to lease my building or something. Who knows? But maybe that's what you were alluding to.
No, I
Using some of that money.
I just think that we need to clean it up a little.
I agree with you there, but what's thoughts, good?
I guess the one request I would make is that we really get specific on what you mean by clean it up.
Well, I
Is
just,
are we power washing sidewalks and curbs? Are we making sure that there's no trash and leaves built up? Those are things that the city has some control over when it comes to our right of way. But then once you get to the buildings themselves, then it's private property and we need to have the permission of the property owner to do anything.
well,
Yeah.
So I guess the question is what actual nuts and bolts cleanup activities would you like to see happen that we have control over?
well, for me, it is cleaning up the sidewalks and the curbs and actually showing the business owners that we care enough to clean it up, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because you get a lot more traction when you actually have some action on your part. And to my knowledge, we've never done that. I've never seen that being done in the city at all. It takes money because it would come out of our public works, but maybe some of this money needs to be done for that. I don't know. I just think that there's a lot of, that we can do to show that we as a city government really do care and want to do something instead of just throwing money at everything. We need some action. That's what I think.
Mr. Mayor, I seldom agree with Diane, our councilors, but I think we've talked about this sidewalk thing for a long time. And I don't know that we should put that on Public Works necessarily, but that's probably the way you're going to have to go. But if you went down there from the bank across the A&W and went all the way up to 12th Avenue and did that sidewalk on that particular block or whatever it is, that would probably make a pretty clear message that we are serious about this. And I understand that Diane will run the thing. She'll run the
Power washer?
Yeah, power washer. So that's a good thing. But it might be a thing that we could do on a work session sometime and have the Public Works people help us and do it on a Saturday or whatever, we work something out. Because I agree. It would be a big plus for us to make a picture of what we want to have happen, and we're going to help you as best we can.
Let me talk to Greg about manpower and about the time required to do something like that. And
Well, it would probably take a whole day to do that section.
Yeah, and to be honest, I've never used a power washer, so I have no idea. But, it's something I'd like to look into. I guess for the purposes of this conversation, I don't see that that's necessarily the SEEP program.
Yeah.
It's something else we can do in addition to it.
Yes, and again, the power wash is a great idea, but it's just a start of other things we need to do to clean up downtown. Councilor Goble.
There should be already documentation how long it takes to do that downtown court, because we did it every year for Jamboree.
Yeah.
And there was no Jamboree, so that didn't happen this year. But a couple times a year wouldn't hurt, but once we start stepping across private property, then we take on accountability and liability, and we can't tell people what to do with their private property. To some point we can, so.
Yeah.
It would be nice, but.
We can offer to pay for it and see if they accept, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all we can do. Is just offer and see what happens.
Well, all we can do is dangle the carrot, and I think we should.
Yeah. And if we do dangle the carrot, now correct me if I'm wrong, if we do dangle the carrot and say we will help either paint or do whatever to downtown, we need to be able to back it up, maybe pull it from these funds and get it done.
Well, and
They agree to it. And we've talked about this, Blair, of getting, I'm all for making the contact to all the business owners in downtown and said, come together. Let's come together and meet. Let's have a discussion. What can we do? So I think would be a great idea.
And Councilor Gordy is absolutely right. There's some of those businesses that are not making millions of dollars to do this kind of stuff.
No, they're barely
And if we
hanging
could
on.
help in any, I don't know if this is the way to go. I don't. Whether we're gonna, let's say they get a bid and it costs $2,500 to paint your building. Do we want to do that? Possibly. I don't know.
There's still a small little percentage of those business owners are not aware of the program. So we've really just got to step up and a little bit on that, because I can tell you Bud Mathers is one. He kind of cleaned up his, used to be White's Jewelry, cleaned up his downtown business. I approached him and says, well, why didn't you take part of the oh, there was a program? Now, maybe he was told, I don't know.
Yeah.
But here is a guy who's taking the initiative. He cleaned his own business up on his own dime. He didn't know nothing about the program. So still that's potentially that small little percentage out there that's not part of it, so.
Mr. Mayor, my last comment on this whole situation would be, I think that we need to consider somebody out of the 18th Avenue place. We need to take that seriously, and if somebody applies or asks, then I think we ought to get on board with that and see if that's something that the council wants to do, because there's a lot of places out there that could use some stuff, you know?
Okay.
And there might not be that many, we haven't had that many in town, so how, you know, we can't put a level of that, so anyway.
But I also think, real quick, that there are things you can do to vitalize a community that might be outside the box for some of our businesses. So I was in West Salem last night, driving down the hill, and they've got those cool lights going, and they've got a fire pit going, and I'm thinking, I didn't even notice the paint on the building. I noticed that there's people out there enjoying that, and it was a nice business. And we are not necessarily used to that for Sweet Home, but it would make it sparkle a little bit more. Just somebody to help these businesses see the potential in their building and their site. Anyway, I'm done.
No, I agree. We need to look a little bit past 18th Avenue, and I don't think we necessarily have to lose sight of Long Street either. There's still a little bit of Long Street.
That's true. That's right.
Long Street that could use some TLC. So in my opinion, unless the council disagrees, I think we need to reach out to all businesses and see if we can't have a community get together and decide if we can't, especially downtown, and see if we can't get some of this
There's
cleaned
more
up.
than just this program to talk about with
Yeah.
businesses. And so, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Anything else from council on this? Okay. Moving on to discussion only vacant buildings.
Okay, so we've talked about this topic a little bit in the past. It is a tricky thing because there's a number of reasons why a building might be vacant. It may be that the property owner is just waiting for the right tenant and hasn't gotten offers that they can live with. It may be that the property, for whatever reason, is not appealing to any tenant. And could be anything in between. And so it's not an easy issue to tackle. I did find that there are some communities that have an actual ordinance that they use to target vacant buildings. And the purpose of those ordinances is mainly to provide security and to ensure that the buildings don't deteriorate further. It's something that I've talked with some folks in town and gotten very mixed reactions. Some people very much in favor and really like the idea, and others that see it as a bit more overreach. From my perspective as a staff member, the thing I want the most is information. And that's the thing that I don't have. It is hard to get a hold of the property owners often when it comes to the most problematic property. So was there a question? I thought I saw a hand. So feel free to interrupt me if you have a question during this, during any time during the presentation. So I kind of put together some thoughts on this issue, starting with the purposes. If there's really anything that the city does, we really need to be careful on what our purpose is and stay as close to it as possible, because this is an issue that could negatively impact. But the purposes that I saw
My fault.
were prevent further deterioration of our building stock, ensure security of vacant buildings, gather information on owner intentions, property availability and costs, and connect the property owner with opportunities for buyers, renters, and improvements. Some of these properties, like we talked about, some folks don't even know that the SEEP program exists. If you have an out-of-town property owner that doesn't answer their mail, they probably don't know. And so that's really, it's the information to have a database of folks to contact, having those phone numbers is really helpful in reaching out. So the question is, there's a couple options. You could attack it with an ordinance, or you could go after it with some sort of voluntary program. A draft ordinance that I put together, it requires information about the property, the owners, and the people who were responsible for taking care of the property. It requires that the properties be maintained in watertight and secure condition. It has provisions for regular inspection of the vacant buildings, and it also requires property owners to have a local presence or a locally contracted property management company, local meaning Linn-Benton County area. And then the ordinance, because it's an ordinance, it also would have penalties for violating it and means of enforcement, including liens against the property. You could go after it with, there's some drawbacks with that. It's perceived as infringing on property rights. It obligates the city to enforce the ordinance as it's written, so there's not necessarily flexibility with it. It would require staff time to administer and enforce. And it would place at least some burden on the property owner, and it doesn't necessarily lead to productive use of the property. We're not trying to punish someone for having a vacant property because a lot of times that's out of their control. What we do want is just to make sure that it's maintained in some shape that when the right customer comes along, they would be interested in it. Or you could go after it with some sort of voluntary registry. A voluntary program could accomplish some of the same goals, and it would be viewed by the public probably as more gentle, more palatable. But it wouldn't have an enforcement mechanism, because if it's voluntary, there's not much you can do to really, if somebody doesn't follow the program, they just get excluded. You may have less staff time because you probably involved in it because you probably would have fewer participants than an ordinance because it's not mandatory. And but you could incentivize participation by maybe having registration of a vacant property required if they wanted to be eligible for the SEAT program, or if they wanted to use the police department's voluntary trespass program, something like that. You could tie it to services like that. And then finally, the biggest problem though with a voluntary registry is that the real problem properties are probably the least likely to participate in something voluntary, as they already don't really want to take care of their properties, and so why would they do something in addition like this? So I guess there's a copy of a draft ordinance that's in your packet, and I really would like some, mainly from tonight, would like some direction on how, is this something that you still want to go after, and what your thoughts on the how, because we certainly could move forward with it and move something toward passage of an ordinance or go after a voluntary program, but there is some staff time investment involved here, and it would likely have a lot of response in public opinion. So what do you think?
Councilor Goble.
I, for one, am really hot on not making ordinances and things like that we are not going to be able to enforce. I think we do need to do something. We've discussed everything from in the past to talk about putting arts and stuff in the windows of the businesses to make sure there's something there, painting the windows, things like that. We really can't make them do anything, but we need to have something in place if you're going to have a business in downtown core that you are responsible for the upkeep and everything like that, or something's gonna happen to it. I mean, I don't know about placing liens on. I don't know if the city's in the business of doing liens on properties and buying and selling properties, but there needs to be something put in place that these buildings just don't, whether they're occupied or not, that they don't just get ran down to nothing, because then they're just a hazard for anybody else that's around.
You bring up a good, one thing that you could add to it is limiting it to a certain area. If your purpose is to just the downtown, then perhaps crafting the ordinance that it only applies to just that portion. That way you're not affecting residential property or other areas that are further off the beaten path. And it might kind of decrease the staff time load. That's something to think about.
Well, excuse me one second, one moment. You said residential, there's already something in place for residential. Is this just commercial or residential as well?
I have found from other cities applying to both, any vacant property. And there's some cities that have programs that they've enacted them during the recession in 2008 because of the number of foreclosed homes. And there were a number of homes that weren't being cared for because they were bank owned. And so they passed an ordinance to try to keep those homes from deteriorating and make sure that they were taken care of. And that's what they were targeting. This situation of what we've talked about, I don't think that that's really the issue that we're trying to go after. And so we could craft it to make sure that that's not what we're talking about here, that it's not the residential, it's more commercial buildings. But that's the policy discussion that needs to happen, is what reach do you want something like this to have?
So, Mr. Mayor, for me, we already have something in place. We did, it may have changed, don't quote me on that, but we had something in place that focused on the residential areas, which is, no boarding up your windows, things like that. Other than that, I mean, we need to focus on the downtown. That's what this is, vacant buildings. And like I said, we need to do something. Because we just, to be honest, if a window got broke downtown in one of the vacant buildings, it'll be broke for, one's been broke for, 7 months now.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the businesses next door went through and taped the window up so it wouldn't, just keep falling apart.
I concur with Mr. Goebel. I believe that we should be focusing on commercial buildings. Chronic absenteeism is on the renters. They're either charging too much or they have no interest in renting those out. I think we should be looking at the ones who roll over frequently. I think they're trying to be good players. You can't always control the tenants that come in and out, but the ones that are empty for over a year, and those are retail businesses, I really think that we need to have ordinances to deal with that, and they need to bite. I'm sorry, and that may not be popular with people, but it's got to be more than their tax break they're getting. It cannot be beneficial for people to leave their businesses open downtown because they're not doing justice to their entire community.
Curious question. Somebody can answer this. I hate to compare to Lebanon because we really shouldn't compare to Lebanon, but there's a lot of downtown businesses in Lebanon that all the businesses are full. There's businesses downtown. Is there anything in place in Lebanon that says, hey, don't board it up and don't do the same thing that's going on in Sweet Home? Or
let me just a moment.
Just curious. It seems like there's never an empty spot downtown Lebanon, so I'm just are they doing something that I'm not aware of? So
I don't think they have. Let me check for sure. I don't think they have a.
Because downtown Lebanon has the same situation we have. There's no parking, but what are they doing?
They have a strong downtown association.
Yeah.
They do.
Very strong downtown association.
And maybe that's what we do exactly what Councilor Goebel and Councilor Gorley are proposing, but also maybe look at a downtown organization. I mean, no offense to the chamber, if we're relying on the chamber, maybe we're not getting what we need from the chamber to achieve what we need for downtown. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's important to recognize the differences between a chamber of commerce and a downtown association. Chamber of Commerce is any business in that jurisdiction that wants to be a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and they can operate on advertising and other activities. A downtown association usually is set on a certain geographic area within a city, and it usually has to do with events and improvements in that particular area with just those businesses and properties that are within that portion. And so there are some cities that have a city-funded downtown association program where they at least contribute something to a downtown association or have a staff member that works with that downtown association. But there usually isn't a city that has the same thing for a chamber of commerce. They may contribute to the chamber of commerce, but usually not a staff person. It's kind of the differences. One example that I saw recently was the City of Independence. They contract with a shared workspace in the downtown, and that shared workspace, I looked at it as an example for a possibility here. The person who runs that shared workspace also is that contracted person for the downtown association. So a lot of the downtown association events are coordinated with that shared workspace, and it fits together quite well. We don't really have that here. What we really would need to see in order to have something like that is it's kind of a chicken and the egg problem, where you need that business involvement to get you to a place where you can start something like that. But if you don't have something like that, it makes it harder to get to that level. So it's a tricky thing, definitely.
I believe Lebanon had somebody at least half-time, and they've recently cut that position. I don't know if they plan on refilling it later, but, because the gal that does our banners, she's heavily involved in that.
I just brought up Lebanon. I was just, as a curiosity as to, because they don't have any open storefronts, and I'm curious to what. But maybe if they're doing something that we're not doing, maybe that'll help.
And sometimes the only difference is just population and getting to that critical mass.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I've been in Sweet Home over 11 years, and I believe that there's some of those commercial buildings that have been vacant the entire time that I've lived here. So, and that's the number one complaint that I get from Sweet Home residents, asking why the city doesn't do anything about that downtown corridor. And so I think it does need to be focused. I think it needs to bite. I don't think it's going to be as unpopular as you may expect it, because people are tired of the empty downtown. I think that doing it voluntary, I think that people wouldn't participate. But I think that if we did, I think we do need to tie some incentives into any type of registration. I think it's a good idea to tie some incentives into that to encourage people to participate in the seat, be registered or whatever. I'm not sure. I'm for a complete license and registration, which is the next topic. But to tie it into those benefits of the police department's voluntary trespass program as well. But I think that we need to put our foot down on some of these things and also set aside some of those funds for that core, because I mentioned last week to somebody, hey, we're going to be voting on spending money on a streetscape plan. And they said, why in the world are you not doing something about the vacant buildings?
So is the consensus of the council, consensus of the council is to focus on maybe an ordinance with some bite? Is that what I'm hearing? In the downtown corridor?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, you have to define that.
Yes.
You're gonna have to define that again.
Yeah, define.
It's gonna be from First Avenue to,
You want to consider the downtown
yes.
corridor.
Go ahead.
Can we have that blue and purple map up again?
Exactly what I was going for.
So that was basically the Main Street and Long Street corridors. Main Street from First Avenue to 18th and Long Street from Holly Road to 18th.
But if you consider looking at that map, the downtown area probably does end at 18th, but there's a lot of business out toward 22nd to Clark Mill Road and all out there. So my concern would be, I'm just going to say Hoy's is out there. The Taco Time is there, whatever that's called. And a bunch of them now, Dollar Tree, the dollar store, whatever the heck they are.
Would you just want to limit it to commercial properties?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
And leave it at that?
Yeah.
Or do you want to narrow it further to certain areas?
No, I think that's our intent. Leave it to commercial properties.
Yeah, I think that's right too.
Okay. Now I'm going to throw one other spitball idea. This is just feedback from the council. From what I'm hearing on a couple ideas and things at Lebanon and so forth. Do we want to go as far as, having an ordinance that with some bite, like we're talking about with commercial businesses downtown? We've got this money from the SEAP program, maybe not a full-time position, but maybe a part-time position within the city, using some of the funds to cover for a coordinator for downtown that we can implement maybe some incentives working with the city, so we can kind of keep our thumb on downtown, what goes on. I'm just throwing ideas out if that's something, the council's thoughts. And maybe that coordinator works under you, Blair, for economic development and part-time, and that's their job, downtown, part-time, coordinating, like you're saying, Lebanon. I don't know find out what Lebanon's doing, but maybe something of that nature to help stimulate and push downtown.
I would be in favor of that as long as they are reporting what they're doing. I don't want to have somebody saying they're doing stuff without making those contacts, without working it
Yeah.
like it's supposed to be. I want them to be highly accountable. And
There has to be accountability layer there. There's no question, but what's,
I want it to be I don't want it to dwindle away all that money just on an employee. Not saying just on an employee is important, but to maybe really have honed in on how many hours we expect that person really needs to work in order to accomplish.
yeah, no, I'm just throwing that idea out. Maybe you don't want it.
I kind of like the idea. I just want to make sure it's really clearly defined.
So how many hours a week would it take to be able to do this task? I don't care about what day they spend their hours, but are we looking at 15 hours, 20 hours, 10 hours a week?
I think it entirely depends on what the deliverables are. What are you expecting out of this position? So the activities of a downtown coordinator, I mean, there's one, just the basics of getting to know all the businesses and make sure you have that database of who is where, what do they do, what the situation is with their property, all that information to manage all that. But beyond that, I mean, a lot of downtown coordinators do things with events. They do things with shop local programs, things that are designed to bring people into those downtown businesses, advertise shop local programs, those kinds of activities. And so that's the question is what do you want to rate this person on? What activities? Because that's going to dictate the amount of time it takes for someone to do.
I think that all sounds good, including meeting with the businesses and talk about the facades and what could be done with their businesses.
What's some of the councilors' thoughts? I just threw that out. It's up to the council.
Well,
Some of that's my job anyway.
Yeah, it is. No, I mean,
And I will fully admit there's a lot of that I would like to be doing more and was on track to do that, and then COVID hit and it kind of got derailed, but definitely needs to be done. And that's the other thing is that in the midst of a pandemic, it's really a lousy time to start a retail business, and that's starting to do events downtown now is probably not going to have a lot of success coming from it. But once we're past this.
maybe it's next year or whatever too, but I mean, it's just
Blair, is that something that is in your job description that you should be doing? And we don't need to hire somebody else? My question about hiring somebody is if you go beyond 20 hours, I think you're into the PERS thing and the insurance thing. Is that not true? And so you gotta be pretty careful.
Yeah, you want to be careful. Personnel costs are expensive and can deplete a fund pretty dang fast. So it's definitely something to be careful with. As for my job description, I haven't read it recently, but there's, other duties as assigned. There's a lot of this that's covered there, and I have no objection to making it more of a priority for me. But it is important to recognize that time is finite, and I can definitely develop more of my time. I can't develop all of my time.
I understand that. I'm not saying,
Half, I guess, is what I'm
well,
saying.
you brought it up, so I'm just saying that,
Oh, yeah.
that if,
No,
if that's the case, then why do we need to hire somebody else? Not necessarily opposed to that, okay?
I don't, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just.
Done, regardless of who's doing it.
because we need somebody to work as a community cheerleader, and you're not a community cheerleader.
He didn't look good. In a skirt.
Well, I mean, that's really what we need, is
I don't know.
somebody that rallies people together, and whether it's 10 hours or 15 hours a week, I don't think it takes a lot. But I do believe we have people like that in our community.
Yes, we do.
What I would
And it
really
could be
love,
temporary
and
for now, and recess it.
And I know that this brings up lots of baggage along with it, But I would really love for the chamber to take on a lot of that kind of role, because I do see it as closer to a chamber's role than a city employee's role.
And we pay $15,000 a year.
And so adding just things like that to our expectations
Yeah, I know.
of what we get for that money, I think that's a conversation I think that would be important to have.
Well, if I may interject in that, that's for visitor center. It has nothing to do with
No,
business
I agree.
development.
I agree.
And actually they're
Get an ordinance to, with a little bit of a bite and stick, and let's move forward. And then the chamber,
I would request, in your packet is a draft vacant building ordinance. I would, if you have comments on that or thoughts of any differences that need to be, any changes that need to be made to that, definitely let me know. One other possibility, as we're wielding that stick, we could add an adjustment to the SEEP program that is especially for vacant buildings. You know, maybe they get a different percentage, or maybe they get certain things covered that could be eligible for a project that other properties aren't eligible for. You know, I don't know if you want to go that cudgel, we can do that too.
Commissioner, I'm just for anything that will give them incentive to do something. I mean, I know we're limited to, you know, money and all that stuff, but my goodness, we, to be honest with you, I don't know that we have done a very good job at making this happen. As a council and as a city, we just haven't, you know, I don't think we've pressured that far enough to make it worthwhile not worthwhile, but to get where we really want to be. And this might be the answer to that, some of that.
There's not going to be a single silver bullet, but I think there are lots of things together that could have that impact.
Yeah.
We will never get where we want to be
No.
unless we address this issue.
Yeah, so I think go through it and get back to Brandon or not Brandon, Blair, excuse me, I'm sorry, Blair. And any questions or any things you want to add to it, and let's move on. Moving on to business license and registration.
So, this was another thing we've talked about, and again, it's something else that I've at least want to be careful with because it can be perceived differently depending on who you talk to. With COVID, one of the things that the biggest problems that we've had throughout this whole mess is lack of information and trying to get information out to businesses. And it was amazing to me how much I could talk about a single thing and have people still not know anything about it because we didn't And then information on any hazardous materials or chemicals that they use in their business that we can pass on to the fire district and emergency personnel. The same benefits that we've talked about already could be a part of this program. Automatically enroll people in the police department's voluntary trespass program. You could require participation in something like this for SEEP grant eligibility. The license information could be shared with RAIN, SBDC, the chamber to provide those networking opportunities that would be really helpful to businesses. And then we could also use this business information over our city media channels, social media, website, et cetera, to promote buy local campaigns and promote going to businesses here in town first before going outside to Lebanon or Albany. Like we said before, like I said earlier, we need to battle possible misconceptions. I really am not in any way suggesting any tax on business activity. And I would encourage the fee to be either zero or as low as possible so that it only covers the costs of the program and nothing more. Because I want to avoid any perception that this is about a revenue grab. And this is not anything that I would suggest that we use to control any business activity. There's enough controls at the state and federal level. This is strictly about information. And then I would recommend that it not apply to any children's babysitting jobs or anything like that, or even out of town contractors. We're interested in knowing about our own business people and the entrepreneurs in our own communities, not somebody who's based in a different city that comes here to make a delivery or do a repair on something. So those are my suggestions for a program like this. And again, just like your feedback on what your thoughts are.
Mr. Mayor, no secret. I think this is something that's definitely needed. I like the voluntary part of it. I like not charging for it. I think that at least that's the first step. We should see how that goes. I think the incentives are a great idea. I hadn't thought about that, but I like that idea. I think the fire department would be very happy with that kind of information. I like the idea. It's a long time coming.
I'm on the fence about this because I could go either way with council decision on this. I am a business owner, okay? And I have a permit fee right now for my alarm system, and it's $15. And to me, it's a good investment because the police know who to call, what chain of order, who to call 24/7. So I don't have a problem with the $15. The only thing with a volunteer, I don't think you're going to get people volunteering. I think that's going to be a stretch to get people to volunteer on that. As far as the fee, I said this in a previous meeting that it shouldn't be, if anything, it shouldn't be that much at all. If it's to $5, $10, $15, that's, my opinion is if somebody came to me and said, okay, your business license is $15, I own a business. If I don't have $15 to give the city, then you shouldn't be in business because if you can't do $15, then why are you in business? Okay. I don't have a problem with either way, business license. I think you volunteer, you're going to have a struggle getting them to do it. And I think it needs to be a mandatory. I think it should happen because again, I'll go back to the alarm permit. You got to know who to call, if somebody breaks into a building, we run into it with the fire department. We have a fire in such as the XYB building or whatever. Who do we call? We don't know who to call. So instead of damaging a building, we don't know who owns this building or who to call. We're just making more damage than we need to if we knew who it was. I think it's necessary personally, but I can go either way. $5, $10, I don't think is $10. I don't think we're not talking anything massive. And I think it should be mandatory. Councilor Goebel.
I agree that there should be a permit thing for that. And it should be mandatory. The cost shouldn't be too high. I like the fact that we get the information so we know what's going on, what they have. That's good for the police and the fire department and things like that, and for the city in case something does happen. But for the other things like the volunteer trespass, RAIN, the chamber, stuff like that, that could be in a packet. I don't think we should, if a business coming in, I don't think we should make obligations on them that they may not want or need. But it could be in a packet, so here, if there's other incentives if you want like that, because some people just won't want it.
Maybe it's a $10, I'm just spitballing, or maybe, you know, like you say, an incentive, okay, $10 for a city license, okay? Maybe it's a $10 discount to join the chamber, you know, offset. Just food for thought. But the other thing is, getting back to one point you made, is I've had it personally with me with lenders. They've asked me what my city business license number is, and I'm like, I don't have one. So they do bring that up. Does come up.
One question, Blair, do you guys have a database set up that you can manage this type of information? The spreadsheet, or what's the plan for managing?
Again, this is in the really early stages, so we don't have anything identified right now. I don't anticipate, we have a decent amount of business activity in town, but not a huge amount of businesses. So I don't anticipate this being a major need. We could create a database with existing software, I think, pretty easily.
And Brandon can create a fancy spreadsheet, right?
I have full confidence in Brandon's ability to make things appear out of thin air.
That's okay. Springbrook does have a business license database for contact storage and stuff like that. So
Didn't want to come to a point where, oh no, we need to pay for a database now that we are having all these businesses registered, because I think that I would like it minimum as well.
Well, even if we just use the Microsoft Office, public, what do you call it? Microsoft Access database or something.
we've got options.
So I don't have a problem if you could go to the city website and see the business name, their address, their contact information, a slight description of what they do at their business. I think that's a community service. That's fine. If you want to charge people $10 or whatever, I don't think it should be rolling costs every year that they have to do that. Nor do I believe that we should be doing data mining for other entities. That they want to go to that site and they want to print it off, that's their business. But to collect people's information and hand it over to another entity, that's a deal breaker for me.
I think one time $10 business license should be fine. I don't have a problem doing it yearly, no.
And I don't mind it being brick and mortar or businesses that come into town on a regular business that are there regularly. But if it's the Boys and Girls Club firework booth or something like that, I don't think they should have to pay anything for business.
But you're talking about the data part of things. Keep in mind, to set up a business, you have to register with the state of Oregon. So there's where your data is already. So
I think my problem is when this first came up, the very first time this hit here that I saw, it was a private entity coming and asking for it. Yeah. And we all know the private entity. I'm not going to name them. And I think that we were being asked to do their work and yet collect information, demand that our community pay for that. And no way, absolutely no way. I find that offensive. And so that's why my line in the sand is where it's at.
So the thing that and I fully appreciate that. The one thing that we would want to be careful with is that once we collect information, it becomes public record.
Yes.
And so if someone makes a public record request for that information, we would have to comply. Now, I don't know if we have any provisions in public records law that could protect any of that information. I don't think that you could.
If they understand that people will be able to come to the Sweet Home website and see their little business description and how to get a hold of them, then I feel that that's a trade-off. But if all we're doing is putting papers in a drawer or in a computer system and then handing it over to private entities when they ask for it, I don't think we're serving our business community at all. There's no benefit to them to doing this.
I think we would want to be pretty proactive with the uses of this information, that we would want to make it on our own website at least, and whatever buy local programs we could institute at the same time. I would want to use the information, not just school. But again, if somebody makes that request, what I would suggest is that any application that we require people to fill out, we make sure that they're aware on that application that, hey, this is information for your business and how to contact your business. We assume that you want customers. you should not be putting a phone number on here that you want to be your private phone number as the business owner and not to be, not for your customers kind of thing. And just make that clear from the very beginning.
Mr. Mayor, though, I'm a little concerned about that because if the fire department could use this number, an emergency, it's probably going to be a personal cell phone number for a business owner or something. Is there a way to protect or guard even just that private, if it's not the public business, that private phone number?
Maybe emergency only.
We'd have to look into how we could protect that. I'm not sure at this time.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think the new rule, I could be wrong on this, but any new business has to have a lockbox for the fire department to get in. So you can't, it's up high and we have the numbers and all that stuff to get to those. We have keys actually. But I got a question about garbage sales.
When you say new business, you mean any new structure?
Yes, I believe so.
Because if somebody starts a business in an existing structure,
Yeah, but that's a fire marshal thing.
Okay.
Yeah, new structure, yeah, that's a requirement, yes.
So give me the answer to garage sales. Are you saying we do not make them do that? Because it says something about 3 days and per occurrence and no more than 2 anyway, so.
We have existing rules on garage sales that are more a part of nuisance code and things like that. I think that's the appropriate place for stuff like that because those are in residential areas. And this is not that. At least I don't see it that way. If you want to include that in this ordinance, I mean, I guess you could, but I would recommend including it only in the definitions to make sure that it's clear that this is not talking about those things.
Okay, I'm good with that.
I don't think this should be, certainly you can regulate temporary businesses, but information about temporary businesses is not really what we're after.
No, I agree with that.
I'm not really looking for a decision as much as a consensus. So let's start off. Do we have a consensus of the council to have a business license?
Yes.
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 Okay. So, yes. Now, do we want it a one-time consensus of the council, one time, or do we want to make it a yearly? Yearly, okay,
I'm undecided on that right now.
okay.
I wouldn't have a problem with the yearly thing. I mean, depending on what it costs, I mean, if it's $10, I don't know, you're right, I don't know who could really afford that, but, and I could be persuaded the other way too, if that's what the council decides, I'm not.
So it's kind
I
of,
think when they apply for a license, they apply for the license. It's not a 1 year, it's not ongoing renewal thing.
okay,
On that note, I just would caution you that the information being fresh is the most important part of gathering this information. And so when you require something to be renewed on an annual basis, it requires you to get updated information because phone numbers change, websites change, all that stuff changes. Now, that doesn't mean you have to charge every year. You could say the initial permit is one amount and then the renewals are either free or a lower amount, whatever you want to do. But I would suggest that you maintain some kind of annual renewal because that gives you some assurances that there's.
that's what the police department, the alarm does. They send me a form and say, any changes, I pay $15, any changes, make note, send it back with your check and.
So are we going to end up with a situation where it's costing us more to enforce this than what we're gaining?
That was my question.
And many businesses, they get a state license and they register. They do have to renew that. But it was just like, wait a minute, we're going to end up chasing dogs here.
I guess.
Not all businesses need to have a state license. And there's a number of businesses during the outreach to try to get people connected with benefits and aid programs. We found that there's a very large number of businesses that are not operating with any state licenses. They're just doing it as sole proprietorships on their own.
With no business name?
Well, no, they're not an LLC or a corporation or any of the stuff that you would license, that you would go through the state for. They're running it as a sole proprietorship, just under their own taxes and doing it that way. There are a large number of people doing it.
Because I was under the assumption that if you have a viable even drop ship and it's business, you're gonna need to have a business name so someone else doesn't take it.
That's a business decision for folks to make if they
Okay.
feel that they want to protect that name, but there's a large number of operations that don't do it that way.
Wow.
So I think, yeah, go ahead.
I'm okay with the annual thing, but my concern too then is staffing and keep sending that out every year, keeping track of that. and
Well,
everything.
one question would be is find out from the chief of police,
How does-
you're upside down or not, because he does it every year. I mean, that's the alarm. You know, he may not do a whole bunch too, so we gotta weigh it.
Yeah, we'd certainly try to automate it as much as possible, but yeah, we'll look into that.
So we gotta, Council Cole.
Well, Brandon said there's something on Springbook that has things on there, could possibly have reminders, but the only reason I said a 1 year thing, and it could be free every after that, you know, just their initial thing, is because every year, if you're doing business good, your business evolves. So 1 year, they may not have any chemicals, and that's not what they want to do. Next year, they could have a whole bunch because they just got into a new world, and numbers and phone numbers and stuff like that change.
I like the fresh information and being able to receive the fresh information for.
Well, and I think the software that we use really will tell a lot about that because, you know, say your renewal is free if you use the online web form to renew, because then there's no staff time, there's no data entry or anything that needs to be done. And then say, oh, if you're submitting it by hand, then you have to pay us because we have to pay somebody to type it in.
I don't think that the chemical issue is really a viable, because that changes from day to day. Your household chemicals are just as dangerous as anything else you have in there with asbestos, and you've got all these other things. And it changes from month to month. You know, if your business requires you to have a lot of that kind of stuff, the fire department isn't going to stop and look, oh, does this business have chemicals, before they go in to put out a fire. And so that just doesn't, I don't think that
I
washes
don't think
with
the
me one way or
intent
the
is to
other.
have a full inventory,
Yeah.
but just to be aware of what could be on site.
An
But
overview.
if that's not one of the purposes that you think are viable, we can exclude that from the.
I think it's a waste of time.
Well,
It was, for me, that was just an example.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you can have a business that, you know, has brought in a bunch of ammo and they haven't got anything done up, and fire department definitely want to know that,
Mhm.
but
You
you
might,
know, it's not that they would put it on the paperwork anyways.
And you
Yeah.
gotta-
Mr. Mayor, all the people that have hazardous materials have to have that on, even the fire department has to have that. So the fire department knows who has them. Okay? It's
It's
not
like my business, I
a
have,
secret that they know.
and you don't have to go look it up, do you?
Yeah. And I don't know. if
my
you guys
business,
know-
I have on file through corporate, an MSDS
Yeah.
breakdown immediate, so fire chief, you go, boom, 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 and he's got how many catalogs of,
If that's not a concern of yours, it's not a concern of mine. We don't have to include that.
no. So the consensus is we'll move forward with
Something.
something and then come back to council with some kind of draft and we can tweak it accordingly.
You have a draft in your packets, so feel free to rip it apart and
Get back to
let me
you.
know what to add or delete or anything like that. And I'll, based on this conversation, I'll go back and do my own revision and then I'll work out with Ray when we want to bring it.
Sounds good. Okay, last but least, business incentive.
Okay, so this is a thorny area. And so it's definitely something to approach with probably even more caution than what we've talked about already.
Can I just interrupt for a second? Is there any paperwork on that in this thing?
There's nothing in your packet, there's just this presentation.
Okay, all right, because it won't let me open that, so.
So first, some questions for you to consider as you're thinking about business incentives. And just to preface this, I hear a number of, if you look at social media or any statements from people running for office or any discussion of what kind of businesses the city should have in town, inevitably somebody brings up business incentives. And there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding as to, one, what kind of incentives that we can actually offer and that we can afford to offer, and two, what effect those incentives will actually have. When it comes to really big businesses, everybody is all excited about, Taco Bell coming into town. They're not going to care whether we have an incentive, because they know where they're gonna put a Taco Bell and they know where a Taco Bell is gonna be successful. We need to make sure we understand, okay, who are we actually trying to attract? What result do we actually want from these incentives? And are these incentives actually going to do it? Because there's some businesses that are so dependent on demographics and the amount of traffic going by a location that it doesn't matter how many incentives you throw at them, their success is not going to be dependent on that. It's going to be dependent on that road that they're on, or how many people of a certain age are in the community, that kind of thing. That's what they're looking out for. So just some questions to think of when you're considering this. What do you hope to accomplish with additional incentives that is not happening now? Is the lack of incentive the problem, or is there something else that's the problem that should be addressed directly? What results do you expect? Is the new incentive likely to achieve those results? Is there a reality or just a perception that additional development would occur if incentives were offered? And then what is standing in the way of development or new businesses now? Is it access to capital? Is it high fees? Is it development costs? Is it rents or building prices? Is it the customers that they would have in the area, or is it the workforce that's available to them here? There's a number of things that affect whether a business starts and whether a business is successful. And incentives can't necessarily make up for all those things. Now, that being said, I should just caveat, lots of places that offer incentives, and there are a lot of times examples where incentives were helpful in making that deal happen. And so they do have their place, but they are not a cure-all, and they're not a guarantee of success. So some reasons for cautions. Incentives are limited to money that you can control. You can choose your incentive, but you may not be able to choose your recipient. You have to make sure you're clear about what activity you want and you match the incentive with the desired result. What are you willing to pay for, and who are you willing to take it from? All incentives cost money, and you may have to rob Peter to pay Paul. So if we talk about strictly the taxes that we do collect, or the fees and things that we collect, some of those things, most of those things, already you're paying for certain services. And if you're going to give some of those up, how much of them are you going to give up, and what are you willing to, it's going to have an effect on your current operations. So the other thing is, beware of unintended consequences. Once you put out the rules, expect someone to game the system, because it will happen. With the exception of enterprise zones and facade improvement grants, very few cities offer any business incentives, and there are really good reasons for that. They may not be able to afford it, or they may not have found a successful blend that will actually help. The vast majority of new businesses fail, and so be careful about just handing out money. Any new incentive should be carefully examined to ensure that it is legal, not likely to be abused, and accomplishes the desired public purpose. So we do offer incentives now. The city has an enterprise zone. Eligible businesses, which are pretty much industrial uses, there aren't any commercial uses that are eligible, can receive property tax abatements for 3 to 5 years, depending on job creation and wages. And this property tax abatement can be on new development and on equipment. This is governed by state statute. It involves all property taxing districts. So if somebody uses our enterprise zone and starts a new business, it's not just our tax rate that they get an abatement on. It's the county's tax rate, it's the fire districts, it's the school districts, it's everybody's. All at the same time. And that's why state statute governs it, because it's not just us. The other incentive we have is our SEAT program, which we've talked about pretty exhaustively. And then whatever business training opportunities we can connect businesses with. So areas that I've kind of, in my research, found where we could offer some potential new incentives. We could, and these, I'll preface this by saying I recommend these be highly targeted and strict, because we want to be careful what results we might have. So planning fee waivers or discounts, Anything in this area could negatively impact the general fund, so you want to be pretty careful with it. The other problem with planning activities is that sometimes, a lot of times they don't pay for themselves in the first place when it comes to the amount of staff time that gets put in on planning activities. And so you may be just making a situation worse, depending on what kind of waiver or discount you're offering. Building fee waivers or rebates. The city currently utilizes a third-party building inspection company. And then in addition to that, 12% of our building permit fees go to the state. So if we offer a complete, paying that entirely, that means we're definitely out some money because we're gonna have to pay the state still. And then we have to pay our third-party contracted building inspections. So there is some room there where you could work out maybe a rebate or something like this. And we've discussed this previously in committee regarding the school district. And that we can talk a little bit about that here. I'm not sure if how much we want to get into that, but the important thing to remember from that experience is that building fees are set by the state and then adopted by the city. Those fees often can bring in more money than it actually costs the city when it comes to the way we have our building inspection service done. And so in the case with the school district, we ran the numbers and found that it did not cost us as much to do all of their inspections and pay the state 12%. All of those costs did not add up to the entire fee that they paid. And so, but we didn't know that until after the fact, because you don't know how many inspections you're going to need depending on the quality of the contractors and the experience level of the contractors that you're using. Sometimes that'll require repeat visits and higher costs. So you could do something where you say, okay, we can rebate you or do a refund for the amount that we didn't, that we received that after our costs are actually covered. You could do something like that, and then you're not out any money at all. But that's a possibility. It's something that you'd want to make sure you have a set policy on, because again, once you offer an incentive like this or offer some discount, if you offer it to one group, you're going to have somebody else with their hand out asking for that too. So what are you willing to give for? Is it limited to nonprofits or other governmental agencies, or are you willing to give that for private enterprise or businesses? Is there a certain kind of business you're trying to recruit or trying to attract? And so do you tie it to that, or do you tie it to the number of jobs that they're bringing into the community? These are all things that you would want to consider and put together a policy that protects you from later accusations, but also protects you from shelling out more money than you actually want to for things that weren't really a part of your purposes in the first place. Another option is to look at SDC waivers or discounts for certain activities. Cities already offer, a lot of other cities offer waivers for, say, affordable housing and things like that, where they say, okay, we're willing to decrease the development costs for these particular things. But those have repercussions, because our SDCs, as we're currently going through that process, are all tied to a capital improvement plan. And you give breaks on those SDCs to some folks, and it takes longer to pay for the things that you wanted to pay for, that you justified the SDCs in the first place with. So those are things to consider, make sure that those are targeted. Another idea is tax rebates. While we have an enterprise zone that offers abatements for all of the taxing districts for job creation and dependent on wages, the city does have its own tax rate that you get to decide what to do with. If it has a public purpose, those property taxes go into the general fund. It's just your portion though. So if you offer something like that as an incentive, you gotta communicate it carefully and make sure businesses or whoever you're trying to attract understands that this is only a portion of their tax bill that's actually affecting, because you can't control whether they get a break from the school district or the fire district or any of those other districts.
I mean, I got a question. I want to interrupt because I'll forget this. But our rate is so low that we don't have any way to go. If we do that with the taxes, we get hurt big time. And so I don't think that would be something I'd ever be interested in, because our rates and we begged them to change it, but they said absolutely not. And there's only two.
I agree with you there. It may be that it's not something that's, first of all, it's probably not large enough to even make that much of a difference to the people that you really want to bring in. And then also you may be hurting yourself significantly.
Well, and the only point I want to add to that is if you're offering that as a tax break as an incentive, then you're doing it on taxes you haven't already started to earn. So yes, you have more services that you're potentially offering, which remember is court, kid and parks, but that's not money you've actually started to see yet.
Over the years, this topic has came up numerous times. Planning fee waivers and building fee waivers and SDC fee, all this all came up. Problem is, you set a precedent and it's going to come back and bite you in the butt. The thing of it is I'll give an example of Lowe's in Lebanon. You know, Lebanon offered a lot of incentives and Lowe's came back and it cost Lebanon dearly. You got to be careful with all that. In my opinion, the best incentive that we can do, and I've heard this from a couple discussions, in my opinion, the best incentive we can do is the education we can provide to the public. In other words, letting people know we have enterprise zones, a SIP program, but promote our city. You know, we sat down and met with an organization here a while back, and you guys were privy on this. And in a nutshell, when they came back to us, in roundabout words, where our board says, we're not coming to Sweet Home because there's a stigma about Sweet Home and you're not promoting your community that well. And it was an eye opener because they basically said, you're not promoting your city. I mean, I'll pick on Bend. I'm constantly saying, come to Bend, move to Bend, you know, all this all the time. There's always promote city. And that same organization was saying, well, you better find out who the people are that Independence and Monmouth are using, because they're doing a heck of a job. Promote your city. That will get the board to say, hey, let's take a look at Sweet Home. Because when you look at Sweet Home on a whole, in my opinion, we got a beautiful city. We have a lot to offer. We just got to get that word out. So why are we giving away? It's like, give everything away. Why give everything away? We don't need to give everything away.
And to be clear, the reason that we're talking about this now is it was identified on the questionnaire.
Yeah.
That this was something that was of interest to the council. But yeah, these questions need to be considered. There's a lot of these that I would definitely not recommend, but they're the options that we have available. The one that I found that I think has a lot of room for potential is if you have a targeted area that you want to improve, like the downtown, you can say, okay, building fees for these types of improvements, we will give you a rebate after our costs are taken care of. And that's something that wouldn't really hurt the city terribly much, but might be, it at least gives you some content to market and say, hey, we're doing our part to step in there. And maybe it's not a huge amount, but it might be something that gets somebody thinking about it.
Councilor Goble.
I like that. I like that very much. Also, we've talked in the past, I got two things. One, I have to go get my kids. Two, in the past, we talked about things that we could do, and that was delineations, wetland delineations, things like that, getting everything ready to go. So if somebody did come in, we have the property that's already shovel-ready. Yes, and those are things that we can do that doesn't really cost us anything, but make us ready to go.
That's a lot of what Lebanon did.
Yeah, they were ready to go.
They're ready to go.
Well, but to be sure, there are costs associated with that.
Yes.
But it does save time and it saves effort. It's something that you can say, hey, this right here for this type of project, you're set. All you need to do is give us your plans and get your building permit. You're good.
I agree with Councilor Vogel. I mean, but the bottom line is, you just can't give things away. We gotta think outside the box of how we can bring business, bring people to the community, but not giving things away. Because our STCs are cheap right now. Why do waivers and do all this? Because it's just not gonna be helpful, in my opinion.
Well, I think we've
Thank
had
you,
this
excuse me.
conversation that people will come if we put on our best outfit. And by taking care of Main Street, by taking care of our parks, by making Sweet Home appear
Thanks,
more
James.
livable, that we would attract a higher, clientele, basically, then that is the best thing we can do to attract business. They will come because we have so much land available if we're a good place to site their business. I don't believe a business that is going to build up from the ground up is going to base whether they come here or not on those kind of incentives.
Mr. Mayor, I agree. I don't want to give anything away, but I did like the rebates on the downtown corridor for those that choose to improve. I think it's just another carrot we can give to improve that downtown corridor, but specifically for that. I think it is, if we're going to do anything, it's got to be very limited, but I don't want to give anything away. I think we do need to market Sweet Home better. Yeah.
Well, you remember the video that was put out by whoever that was? That was pretty.
Got a huge hit on
Yeah,
that.
pretty effective. And I don't know that we got any results from that, but it was a good thing. I mean, they presented that very well.
And to add to one thing, and Councilor Gerson brought this up in one of our meetings, and this might sound trivial, but she said, did you realize how many times she pulled, remember that you held up the Albany Democrat Herald? In that particular week, we had 3 times that Sweet Home was positively promoted in the Albany Democrat Herald. Okay, I've never seen that. You remember you brought that? I've never seen that before. And I got to thinking, she's right. Sweet Home's never promoted. It's not, you don't see anything about Sweet Home. We're a lost little East Lynn County city. We're not being promoted. And I think some of that has to happen.
Yes.
And I agree with the rebates, but it's got to be very careful.
So in the age of Zooming and virtual tours and things like that, when you click on our website, can you do a virtual tour of each of our parks?
No, we have a map, I think.
I think that would be a good step.
It's interesting.
Literally somebody taking
you
them
been
and
reading
walking
my
through the
email?
park.
It's interesting that you bring that up because not long ago, one of our staff, actually just yesterday, actually. No, it was yesterday. One of our staff mentioned that somebody had contacted her about doing, you may have seen with certain real estate ads where you can do a virtual tour and it's a special camera that does a 360-degree photo of, and you can go from room to room and basically control which angle you look at so you can see the whole place, right?
Like Google Earth.
This particular person suggested doing that for city parks. And I in my email just today, he sent me a demonstration where he just gone and done that at Strawberry Park. And you can click on a link and it'll show you the picture of the park, from the entrance, and then you can, has various buttons highlighted. You can go to different parts of the park and see a 360-degree view of that park. So that's the first that we've discussed that. He just is selling his service, but it's kind of cool. And it could be really a nice add to our website.
Well, even the drone videos, we have the one from the Jamboree. Do we have it on the city site that you can click on that and see the Jamboree? I mean, all of these things, our lakes, the county parks around us, so that we get a bigger picture of what's here. Now, maybe we don't want to do one of the city hall, but it would almost be nice if we did.
Well, the old adage, squeaky wheel gets the grease. I think Sweet Home needs to be the squeaky wheel.
I think that's all a good part of marketing ourselves and promoting ourselves.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot of money either. When we were talking about that video, we didn't spend anything on that. We just asked for volunteers and cooperation. We benefited from a very generous offer from the guy who produced it. But hey, kids these days can do amazing things with just a phone camera. We could put out a contest and say, hey, kids, do your best promotional video, getting your friends to come visit Sweet Home. What would you put on it? And see what they give us.
Kids would love that.
I think
Yes.
that's a great idea.
Sure, why not?
And I'm sure that a business in town would donate something for the winner. I think that's a great idea.
And I know somebody that's got a drone that did the parks thing, and he will do that in a heartbeat. Absolutely. It was pretty cool.
And you'd be surprised who has a drone. I mean, there's
Lots of them. Yeah.
Well, we happen to know somebody who has a contact with that, somebody who's professional and does that, and it would be actually a really good thing.
He's been very gracious to us before with those other videos.
And actually, one way you could run the contest is you could have a bunch of stock footage of the city available, and then have the contestants add their own stuff and do the editing and putting it together to show what they value.
Let's do categories. Let's do junior high and lower, high school, and then adult, and see what they come up with.
I think that's great.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
To look into.
Their communication
Yeah, the kids would be great.
And then we can loop it in the television and, in the lobby.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Anyway,
Yes, Brandon?
does that give you some
Right.
kind of an idea of direction there,
It does
Brandon?
give me a lot to think about, lots of good feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Just a quick thing, Brandon, is Julie online?
I don't know that she is anymore. I see her, but she's muted.
Okay. I was just gonna give this.
There she is.
Hi, Julie, how are you doing?
Doing good,
How you feeling?
feeling good, feeling back to normal.
Oh, good. Well, I'm just giving you a shout out. I seen you there and I just want to make sure if you were there, we're going to give a shout out. All the counselors, I think, will do the same thing. And we're thinking of you and hope you're doing well.
Thank you. I'll be back by the next meeting. Looking forward to it.
Sounds good, Julie.
Yeah.
Thanks. You take care of yourself. And
Have a good night,
again,
everybody.
you're in our prayers. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else? The council business of good order? Anything?
While we're at it, let's do a drone of the Knife River property so we can market it to potential partners to develop that. Because I don't know that it's going anywhere, and we could have a private-public partnership if we found somebody that wanted to.
I think it also will help if, I'll be careful with this, certain individual gets in a certain spot. I think that will help our position.
Okay.
I can get Eric to do the drone for us. He'll do that just really easily because he can go up 3,000 feet or something. And it's amazing what they do with those things now. So if that's something you want me to do, I'll get that and I'll see if we can work that out in the next week or two before it starts pouring down rain every day.
We get this going and we might be able to do the same thing with businesses. So when they click on the city link, we could link them to what is the point, what's it look like, right? And so when you come to Sweet Home, you know what you're gonna get.
Well, I think also if we do what property we have available in this community, like the mill property, you know, Sweet Home has property. I mean, I just think you could just say that and it would make people
I think
happy.
people would be amazed how much property is available in Sweet Home.
Right.
And again, it comes back to the topic. I think we just need to do a better job promoting our city.
And
online.
if it costs money, you've got money in that account.
Was that film, was that film just done locally or was it moved outside of our?
The gentleman who produced the one last January that was done,
Yeah.
the gentleman who made that lives in, I want to say the Holly area.
Are you talking about the one that was the contest one? The contest one that the city?
Yeah, for the HGTV.
He lives in Crawfordsville.
Yeah, Crawfordsville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, did that go to Portland or anywhere? We talked about that, but I
We
don't.
submitted it
They didn't-
to the channel.
That's right, but they didn't give it, they didn't put it, what was that, the HGTV, whatever it was?
Yeah.
Receive a lot of views though on YouTube.
Yeah,
Oh, huge
yeah.
impact. And I think we just need more of them.
And also Melody at the chamber, she knows how to do that.
Yeah, she's a great asset.
Yeah, she
I'm
is.
glad she's on board over there.
She's very talented.
Well, I'll have Eric do the property, and then I'll have him do all of the, I'll see if he'll do all of the parks and get those from upstairs, and then he can bring them down and go around. And he'll do that, I know he will, and then he can put it on a thing for us to look at it, whatever those are.
A disc.
Yeah, a disc, yeah.
Technology, Dave, technology.
Are they one of the big discs?
No, no.
Are they, oh, can I say this? Are they?
Speaking his terms now, buddy.
This big? Are they about this big and black with a hole in the middle? Is that what they are?
All right, guys.
I never know what those are.
No,
you don't.
I've never seen a disc. I'm talking about.
It's the storm clouds that'll follow you around.
Oh, shoot. I'll bring one of those so you can know what it is. You won't be able to play it anymore. Actually, they're coming back. No, they are.
Final?
Are we done?
If there's nothing further, we will adjourn at
Yeah, my son, that's all my son plays.